He likes to talk about lore a lot. He likes to talk about canon.
Canon and continuity.
Look, he acts like a purist, right? That everything needs to be exactly this, exactly that, or it's, it's wrong or whatever. And so my theory is, if you believe in multiverse theory, which, why not? Let's do it just for the fuck of it right now. The multiverse is real. Somewhere out there in the multiverse, there's got to be a universe where Eric July understands multiverses. And I think we can find him.
Ponder the question, what if?
I don't understand it.
I think we can find the variant of Eric who you like, hey, do you know what a multiverse is? And he's like, yeah, of course I do. And I'd be like, hey man, I don't know if you know this, but pretty much all the other variants of you, they don't understand it. And he would probably be pretty embarrassed to learn that. But I believe he's out there somewhere.
I don't understand it. I understand it.
He's got a podcast or something, a series that he does called For Canon's Sake. And he likes to talk about canon a lot. He likes to talk about lore, and he loves to say that the mainstream comics industry are disrespecting and destroying canon and lore, and like they don't respect what came before and so on, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I've always wondered what he meant by that. And then I started really kind of thinking about the examples of things that we've already covered on this channel with him. And then I started looking at some of his like content, like other stuff that I haven't looked at yet. Just like, what does he give any examples what he means by disrespected canon? Because I've got, especially Marvel, but DC, some DC too, I've got a dozen reference books, whether it's like the mythological side of Marvel, the history of the Marvel universe, and then I've got another history one from I think the 80s. There's very little that I've seen or noticed that, and I'm somebody that digs into canon, and I've been reading this shit all my life, and I love canon too. So I get it. Like, I get the love for canon, but I also know the canon, and I understand the mechanics of storytelling and how canon can be changed, right? Like we talked about it before with the Winter Soldier being a retcon from Bucky, who he was dead. He was dead. He died at the end of World War II, and that was it. And then Ed Brubaker comes along. He has this idea, and he says, well, no, what if Bucky had actually been, so the story. And the Winter Soldier is a very popular character. A lot of people love the original story he was in. Very good. A lot of cool stuff done with him over the years. And now he's, very well-known character in mainstream audiences. I don't think anybody would really try to argue that was a bad retcon. I don't know. Maybe somebody would. But yeah, so I started looking at some examples and realized, oh, this is what he means. This is what he means when he says they're disrespecting the canon, they're disrespecting the lore, they're breaking the lore, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, his increased rhetoric about being the God King of comic books is... you're not the only one who's noticed, and it's starting to annoy.
Well, we're going to fucking destroy that today. Just, no, I don't want to beat around the bush. I'm going to dismantle that concept, that idea, that aesthetic, that narrative that he's created for himself. I'm going to prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, complete, utter bullshit. The guy is full of shit. And when I say he's a grifter, this is what I mean. I'm not going to talk shit on somebody just for not knowing the things that I know, right? What I will talk shit on is somebody not knowing the things that are just true. And then either, I don't know if he's wrong or if he's lying or stupid or what. I want to lean towards lying, but I don't know. But I've got several examples here that will show that he's wrong. Whatever the intention is, whether it's intentional or not, stupid, lying, I don't know. It's an arrogance that is unearned, undeserved, and I really, really want to fucking poke a hole in it, because so far talking about Eric July, all I've done is I talked about the marketing of his comic book, his career, his the comics itself, the fundraising, the marketing, and so on. But what really haven't gotten into what appears to be his understanding of how comics work and what things mean. I mean, we've hinted at it. There's definitely a couple of memes here and there. You know what I mean?
I don't understand it.
That's not from him talking about comics. That's from him talking about the roads. But I like to use it when it comes to multiverses because, man, he really doesn't. So Yeah, just to remind you, here's his logo for his show. You know, I mean, think about where the original phrase there is like, for God's sake, right? For Christ's sake. So he's placing canon as basically God of comic book lore, I guess.
I believe that the word canon originally comes. It begins with the church as well.
I think you're right. If he wants to elevate canon to such a high degree that he's literally equating it to godliness, I'm not going to disagree with him on that. I'll do it too. Sure. Let's look at canon as the be all end all, but I think it's important to understand what it means. I think it's important to understand that the things your claims you're making about it are accurate. So I am stealing a show. We're going to do a for canon's sake. The Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 trailer came out, as I'm sure most of you watching saw. It's really exciting. It gave me vibes that kind of reminded me of the first one more than the second one. Not that the second one sucks, but just being able to have those vibes of the original again kind of felt nice. They're wearing the original costumes, or the costumes from that, run in the comics that it was based on. Gonna get more, gonna get Rocket's origin. We're gonna get other, animal hybrids, the High Evolutionary, which if you've watched my content for a while, I have a theory about him, and maybe I'll edit that in right here. I don't know.
So I always found the High Evolutionary to be a hilarious character. Just his name, coupled with how he seems to love turning animals into people. Like when he was younger, was he just the Evolutionary? The Evolutionary took a big bong hit and says, "Whoa, dude, what if we, turn the dog into a dog person? The High Evolutionary is born."
Yeah, looks good. Looks great. And then Adam Warlock. Exciting to finally see him, in the comics. Adam Warlock plays a pretty enormous role in everything involving the Infinity Gems, as they're called in the comics. They changed it to just stones in the movie, but they're gems. I think they alternate sometimes with stones in the comics. Anyway, I just finished reading Infinity Wars, which is the 2018 event that is a kind of a twist on the original Infinity Gauntlet. So Adam Warlock, pretty powerful guy. He was originally called Him. In the comics, he was created by a group of humans trying to create the perfect being. He didn't have a soul at first. He encountered Thor. Yeah, and then he moved on to eventually take the name Adam Warlock. He got a soul. That's why he's his character is intrinsically tied to the Soul Stone in the comics. I don't know, if they're going to do something different in the movie, because obviously Soul Stone was apparently destroyed along with the others. But, they've managed to make things work in the movies, even whenever it doesn't go by what the comics did. For example, Age of Ultron, when that was coming out, I was a little bit more of a toxic, kind of piss baby back then. Not even that long ago. And I remember being like, well, how are they doing Ultron if they haven't even introduced Hank Pym yet? And I was like, Hank Pym is one. And then I learned that no, they're saying that Tony Stark and Bruce Banner did it. And I was like, what the fuck? That's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. And it just felt like, you're fucking up canon. Thankfully I got over that mentality. It's a really fucking entitled, spoiled little baby, piss baby mentality to have. Like, of course you can have your preference, but why not give it a shot and see if maybe this alternate take is a good story, right? Who wants to read a comic book and then go see the movie, and the movie just does exactly the same thing? I don't know that. Why would anybody go see that movie? Why would a comic book fan want to see that? One of the reasons I love the MCU is they do, obviously there's a lot of stuff that's very similar, if not in some examples taken straight out of the comics, but there's enough of a twist on things that it keeps me guessing for the most part. Sometimes I guess stuff ahead of time. But I know a lot of shit about Marvel Comics, and I know a lot of shit about these stories that they're adopting from. And I don't want to just go see Captain America Civil War and have the exact same thing that happened in the comic depicted on screen. That's not exciting. That doesn't get, that's not pleasing me as a comic book fan. That's just basically pandering to me. You want to talk about pandering? That's just, it's fan service to the highest degree. And I guarantee that if that's how they did these movies, well, first of all, they probably wouldn't be as popular. And second of all, the same people who complain about things being different in the movies would then complain that it's the exact same. Because those types of people are going to be pissy no matter what.
You know what? It would really help if you could just say anything other than what you don't want.
So this was Eric July's video response to the news that, or the trailer that showed Adam Warlock.
What's up? We have an opportunity to really, talk about some stuff as a why checked out on a lot of what happens with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and whatnot. I mean, with the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer being released not too long ago, it really shows exactly what it is that I'm talking about.
And just, to a little context, in case you missed any of my previous coverage of Eric July, his entire thing right now is, and probably for a while previously, is about talking shit on mainstream comics and movies and such, so that he can build up his own derivative, generic, crucifix dick, boring ass character Isom. Because once again, he can't sell his book on its own merits.
Ponder the question, what if?
He has to ride the coattails of Marvel and DC.
This company is going to make me so much money.
I mean, yeah, and that's the title of the video, by the way. This company is going to make me so much money. So at least he admits it. It's all an admission that his comic is not interesting or inspired enough to just grab people's attention as a comic book. Like, sure, he's saying negative things about them, but he's acting like whenever I said something to him about it on Twitter, he was like, oh, just because I'm criticizing it all the time. It's like, no, I don't care that you don't like it. I don't care that you're criticizing it. I care that you pretend to be an expert, and then you foster this hostile, toxic, culture around your content and around, Marvel and DC, and it creates, kind of, it's a gatekeeper thing, right? Because, as I said the other night with AJ Ampadu on here, I've developed an audience full of, it's a pretty diverse audience. From what I can tell, a lot of people of color, a lot of black folks, a lot of trans, non-binary people, queer people generally. And it's not like I did that on purpose, right? I didn't come out here trying to cater to those people specifically. I'm just a fucking cis white dude. I actually thought that I wouldn't be liked by people like, black people and trans, because I just look like your average dude, bro, and I sound like one. But apparently, and this is what I've learned, and I'm very grateful for, and happy that it's worked out this way. The culture of this stuff is so toxic and hateful in just general spaces that people finding my channel is like they flock to it when they find it, because it's like they don't feel safe in other random, fan spaces and whatnot. And I'm happy to, be that. I'm happy to provide what I can for that. And that's one of the main things that motivates me these days, is just knowing that it means something to people to have a place where they feel like they can express their fandom without being defined by their, gender or whatever. I'm the superior cis man, right? The point being that that's the issues that I have with him. Not that, his fans want to attack me and be like, oh, you just don't don't want to see him succeed. It's like, I don't care if he succeeds. In fact, cool. If he wants to create a comic and people love it and he makes a shitload of money, great. What I don't like is the using cynical, negative, nonstop, hateful rhetoric about the stuff that already exists because you don't believe in or know that you can't sell your book on its own merits. I don't like it. Not because I'm a shill defending Marvel. I don't care if people don't like Marvel. I don't care if just some random person's tells me, oh, you like that? That's stupid. Like, all right, fine. Cool. Doesn't affect me. What affects me is the other stuff. Anyway, so that little context there, that's what I think of Eric July. I'm not against him making a comic book. I'm against him creating toxicity, fostering toxicity in a hostile audience, and enabling bigotry, calling characters tokens, for no reason, and then creating a token, essentially, talking about representation, of in comics is a bad thing, and then making a black superhero and not seeing the irony to that. I give him props. because clearly he has realized the importance of representation in comics, right? He created a black superhero, you know, and I assume, I haven't heard him talk about it, but I assume somewhere in there was the logic that, you know, he wanted to see himself represented in the comic that he creates. Otherwise, he would have created Isom would be a white dude or whatever. But no, he made him a black dude because on some level, whether he realizes it or not, Eric July knows that representation is important.
I don't really care how much you like the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer, or how enthusiastic you are about it. That's not necessarily what this is. These guys don't know what they're doing.
All right, that's a statement, right? Like that's the premise. These guys don't know what they're doing. I haven't watched this. I mean, I know vaguely what his take is, but I haven't heard how he frames it.
With some of these characters that get introduced, because I do think that there's no true cohesion with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it hasn't been for a long time. I think just like the comic books, it became one of those things where it's like you get a movie, you get a movie, you get a movie, and do whatever it is that you want. Maybe we have a pool of characters that you can choose from to include, but ultimately we're not wanting you guys to be knowledgeable, let's say, on some kind of source.
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?
What the fuck is he talking about, man? Like, what the actual fuck is he saying? He's just making claims, and this is what he does. Just like they're disrespecting the lore. We don't want you to be knowledgeable. Like, I can tell you, and a lot of people can who aren't comics fans but are fans of the MCU. It's pretty clear how things operate. Is anybody in chat? Let me know. Are you confused? Do you feel like there's no cohesion in the MCU? I mean, yeah, in phase 4, they've done some different styles, taking different approaches. But do you feel like it's, I don't know, he doesn't really, he's not saying anything.
Material, as well as constantly working together with your colleagues to make a cohesive story.
All right, so then he's going to move on from that frustratingly, because here's the thing, man. Here's the thing.
It's clobbering time.
Sorry, I'm trying to get, I'm just so kind of astonished that he makes claims like this without backing it up at all and then moves on, that I'm trying to collect my thoughts. He hasn't read comics in a long time. I can tell that. Maybe he used to be a big fan of comics. You know, he seems to be passionate enough, I don't know, to have some connection to them. But, and this video, I think, I have a suspicion it's going to prove me right. He's stuck in the 90s. There's a story about not everybody who makes a Marvel film is a comic book fan. Yeah. Who cares? I'm fine with that, man. I'm fine with it. Christopher Nolan wasn't a huge Batman fan. You know what I mean? To create that kind of, or hold that kind of arbitrary standard is just fucking ridiculous. Zack Snyder was a huge Watchmen fan, and thematically, he got it all wrong. Sure, it looks really good and for the most part and stuff like that, except for the old age makeup. But thematically, it's like he didn't understand the original at all. If I had a list in front of me, I could tell you several directors who, creators who are fans, who didn't make good movies, and vice versa. But you know who is a fan of the comics at the MCU? Do you know who is a huge fucking fan and very knowledgeable? Kevin Feige, the guy who makes the decisions on, and if you think that he's not also working with the writers and directors to make sure that certain things are done a certain way,
it's false. No way. Wrong.
You're wrong. He does. It may not be done the way that you want them to do, but not knowing what they're doing,
not a chance.
No. Sorry. Yeah, and that's a good point, Lucifer, is that maybe the director who's directing the movie doesn't have a lot of experience with the comics. But the writers probably do. There are plenty of people working on these movies that love the comics and are going to put a lot of care and attention into, various aspects. And it's like, just knowing the source material because you have been a fan all your life does not mean that you're able to write it well or that you're able to gonna direct it the best way.
They have no idea what they're doing over there. It's utterly pointless to bring him in now, considering Thanos is gone. This is a botched opportunity.
All right, that's what I wanted to get to right there. That fucking take, man, because, all right, it's a botched opportunity because Thanos is already gone. And I get what he is trying to say there. It's just really stupid. Going back to what I said about Age of Ultron, and Hank Pym not being the one that created Ultron. Narrow-minded, limited way to understand this stuff. Like I said, do you want to just see the exact same shit play out? Like, sure, it would have been cool. It would have been cool to see Adam Warlock play a part in Infinity War and stuff like that, but that's not what makes a good movie. And I want each movie to be effective storytelling. And bringing Adam Warlock in for Infinity War would have been distracting, would have been, kind of pointless. They changed Thanos' motivation from literally being in love with the physical embodiment of death to what his plan was and his goals. And it's like, that made for a good story. So acting like you can't have an alternate take on Adam Warlock's story, that he can't be interesting without Thanos being involved, it's a botched opportunity. It's pointless. There's plenty of stories, since the 90s where Adam Warlock does stuff that doesn't involve Thanos, believe it or not. If you brought the Silver Surfer into it and said that, and then he had nothing to do with Galactus, for example, that would be a bit different. I'd be like, that's fucking what? I would still try to remain open to it. Just maybe they found something good to do with it or whatever. But Galactus created the Silver Surfer. Those two are intrinsically linked since their first appearance. Thanos and Adam Warlock are not. The creation of Adam Warlock had nothing to do with Thanos in the comics and vice versa. Yeah, it's just another arbitrary thing to throw out there to say, to act like a purist. But as we're going to get to in a minute, he doesn't understand some pretty basic shit, right? We've already talked plenty about the multiverse, and we're going to talk about it again. Hey, Eric July, what do you think about the multiverse?
I don't understand it.
Everything you've said has been spot on. It's like he got as far as reading, maybe he read the Infinity Gauntlet. Maybe he just read the Wikipedia article on it, because Adam Warlock continues after Thanos has been defeated. The only thing I can think of about the way he looks is that he doesn't have longer hair. Maybe that's Eric's issue with how he looks in the trailer.
Look, it's a choice to cast that actor. I thought that when they announced it. I'm like, that's a choice. Poulter, maybe?
Will Poulter, yeah.
He's got a distinct look. His eyebrows are distinct. You know what I mean? He's a distinct looking guy. And, Adam Warlock in the comics, the way that most characters are drawn in the comics, they're basically like Adonises. They're perfect form, perfect symmetry. Just everything is, and that would be boring too. That's basically like the DCU, how Zack Snyder was casting people. And I'm open. You know what I mean? It's to be a comic book fan and have such a narrow understanding of possibility and opportunity for storytelling. We might get, I don't know, probably not, but I mean, maybe the Adam Warlock story in the MCU ends up being way more compelling than he's ever been in the comics. Maybe not. But you're closing yourself off to any opportunity for that. And in the same way that imagine if he had been doing this whenever they cast, I guess, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. And he's like, oh, Tony Stark isn't a goofy goofball or whatever, and he just was talking shit on Robert Downey Jr. as closing himself off to a pretty awesome, iconic role that we ended up getting. But,
well, full disclosure, I'm not the biggest Will Poulter fan. I'm not too to be honest. His face annoys me.
Absolutely honest, it's distinct.
He's got an annoying face, and yeah, that's not a very nice thing to say. But then he's a successful actor, and I'm not, so he had the last laugh. But I sort of felt the same way when Dave Bautista was cast as Drax. I thought, well, you can't cast wrestlers. You can't have wrestlers acting. They can't act based on past experience. But then you see him, and also you got to trust James Gunn. It's not like he doesn't know what he's doing in terms of casting. So if he saw him and he thought he was best for the role, I respect James Gunn's decision.
Same. Yeah. I mean, that's where I'm at with it, is just at least wait and see, which is something these guys never do, right? It's always, here's my conclusion at the very first moment that a trailer drops. Here's what I think about this. And it's making a definitive statement about a story that he doesn't know yet. Just because it's not the thing he's used to. And I think Eric Glass probably roughly our age. So he seems like he came up in the 90s comics boom, like so many people did our age, where suddenly comics were really cool. They were everywhere. Goddamn. And and there's some pretty iconic stories that happened in that time period, the early, mid, even some late 90s. There's Infinity Gauntlet being, I think that was 1990, so that was right at the start of it. X-Men, the Jim Lee Claremont run, still I think the highest selling comic book of all time. There's no shortage of stuff in those early days, those days that people latched onto big time. That's not even including whatever DC was doing, and Image popped up in that same period and stuff. So I understand having a very specific connection to these specific stories because they were just the thing that you connected with at that moment. Holy shit. We got Bob, Organized Chaos. What's up, man?
Oh, I didn't realize I'd be on already. Yeah,
I didn't know you were coming on, so I saw you and said, hey. So I just added a new banner up to the corner there that I made just for this occasion.
That's very good.
I don't mean it to imply that you are that, though, Bob, even though it's right over your head. So
yeah, no. Listen, I don't understand it. Okay,
I don't understand it.
Yeah, so it's like these guys have this really strong connection to this stuff, probably the same one that a lot of us had in the 90s, if you're that age. And then they freeze it in amber. That feeling that they had as however old, 10, 12 years old, that is just like your whole world opens up to comic books and the promise of how cool comic books can be. But like, rather than building on that, they just freeze it in amber, put it on a shelf, and they just hold that, and they're like, that's it. That's what comics are right there. And then anytime something is done that kind of deviates or does a different take on it, they're like, oh, it's not that. The thing on the shelf is that, and you made it a little bit different. That's kind of the I guess the visual metaphor that I see for it. How far do we get? We got 2 minutes into that video, and he just made a bunch of a bunch of opinions, which he's entitled to, but they're stupid and they're not informed, and they're like a really limited. He's expressing a limited form of fandom and acting as if he's an expert, and that propagates that type of mentality that that what he's saying is just the truth, and anything outside of that is woke or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Like, but the fact is, these guys were never gonna get completely on board with this stuff, right? Like, I'm surprised Nerdrotic is, but I imagine he'll be making some negative content about it before long.
Oh yeah, of course. That's the grift. I mean, you gotta bash on it all, right?
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to do with Guardians because the female characters have always been quite prominent. There are people of color in those roles, but they're playing aliens, so it'll be interesting to see what his angle to take pot shots of that movie will be.
My God.
I heard you guys were talking about my abs, so I decided to join.
Yeah, you're almost as ripped as I am.
Nice.
A thing I want to point out, because Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity War and Endgame were exactly the same story. It was a carbon copy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's and this goes to show the anti-fan thing, right? Because as he said at the beginning, I used to be into it, and I know I'm not anymore. I got out of it a long time ago, and it's like, why are you talking about it? Why are you acting disappointed and talking about botched opportunities? Why don't you talk about something you do like? Oh wait, they never talk about what they like, unless it's the thing they're making money off of, like ISOM. Do you want to just kind of run down how this came about, the July debate thing?
Oh yeah, I just he was talking crap and I emailed him and he wanted to monetize me. I said, hey, you can monetize me. I'm a hater, whatever. And he just I don't even remember when. I think it was like the next day. We had set it up literally for the next day, and I just showed up.
All right. So from what I can tell, this was the context behind this conversation was he was upset about Superman. This is at the point when I think they were still talking about J.J. Abrams, maybe.
Oh, true. Okay, that's what you meant. Sorry.
Yeah.
I took a gummy, Dane. I'm not gonna. I wasn't expecting to come on. Sorry, man.
It's all good. It's all good. So yeah, there was when they were still talking about maybe doing that. I think it was J.J. Abrams they were talking about doing that movie, right?
Yeah, I think he was producing it for a bit.
That they were going to do a new take on Superman, and it was going to be a black guy. And what I didn't really think about when we covered this on here before was the context of like, I just kind of assumed that, like, I didn't really think about it. I didn't know what exactly the news was that Eric was responding to and that Perp was then responding to him about. But I looked back at the date and I was like, oh, it was from when they were doing this.
Let's use an actual example. What do you think of the new rumors that the next Superman might be a black actor?
I'm not a fan.
Why?
Because Superman is not black.
Superman's not human.
Yes, he is. He actually is a humanoid. He's just not from Earth.
So he's an alien.
So the part that I was focused on prior to this was the end part where he says he's not. It's so
he is
dumb.
a humanoid, and it's like, well, that's a goalpost shift. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not even accurate. Let me listen again because it's so dumb.
Yes, he is. He actually is a humanoid.
So Perp says he's not human, and Eric says no, he is. He's a humanoid, and so they're clearly there. He thinks that humanoid is just they don't mean the same thing. We've talked about that before. Where like a humanoid, like Data from Star Trek, is a humanoid because he's generally human features. That's what a humanoid is. A humanoid can be anything. A cosmic entity can take a humanoid form. It's not an interchangeable thing. It's not. So that's a dumb defense on its own. But even still, the idea that an alien humanoid can't be a black guy is also stupid. And like, why not? But then there's more just within that. There's more stupidness, right? It's why it's a multiverse of morons over here.
I wasn't helping either.
That's okay. I mean, you were fighting a good fight. You didn't, it's hard to. I've talked about this 3 or 4 times now, and I'm just now unpeeling all the layers of how stupid it is that he said that. And the thing that he likes to say about canon, they're disrespecting canon and lore and stuff like that. What I realize he means by that is stuff like this, where they're like, hey, let's do this take of Superman that's, black Superman, right? But this black Superman is not Clark Kent. They were not planning to make him Clark Kent and just say he's black. It was going to be either this one, the Kal-El with Calvin Ellis, who is the president, and guess who he was kind of based off of, in an alternate Earth 23, or it was going to be, Val Zod. I'm pretty sure it was going to be Val Zod, who is also from an alternate universe. And then you start to see a recurring pattern with Eric July, where he has a problem with alternate reality takes on stuff, and he also thinks that breaks canon. No, these things are canon, dude. They fucking are canon. You may not like them, you may not understand it, but they are canon. The idea that Miles Morales or whatever is not canon, or that breaks canon, it doesn't. Do you even know what canon means? Like, for somebody that has a show called For Canon's Sake, he seems to really not fucking grasp the concept. It's just pretty crazy to think that a guy who professes to be an expert, basically, and on comics and is constantly getting bent out of shape about canon doesn't understand it. I'm not going to do it. So yeah, it doesn't break canon. I won't, like I said, I won't defend DC stuff to anybody because for one, I don't know it as well, and I also do think they have broken canon a little bit. From just a little bit I know, but Marvel, I will defend against any claims. If there's an email, send me an email, actualfandom@gmail.com. Fill out one of the debate forums. That's also on my channel, on my Twitter bio. If you think that there's something in Marvel Comics that the canon has been broken, and they're just like ignoring something that happened in the past to tell it, then please let's talk about it. It doesn't have to be a debate, but I really want to know, because typically whenever I see the kind of claim, it's something like this. So yeah, it's adaptations, legacy characters, and alternate reality takes that they think breaks canon.
Oh, I was just going to come in with the hot take and say, even if it was a black Clark Kent from an alternate dimension, it's still an alternate dimension. So I'd even argue that doesn't break canon.
You're 100%. It doesn't break canon. It doesn't break lore. And in fact, it is lore. It just is lore. Like I said, it may not exist in this reality. It may not even cross over to this reality, which makes it even more or less of breaking lore, right? Like the fat lesbian Poison Ivy, like that's probably never going to cross over into the main DC continuity. Sun Spider is literally happens in Spider-Verse, which is literally about crossing over these realities, but it doesn't change anything. It doesn't make Peter Parker's story less, important or whatever. It doesn't take anything away. And I don't get it, man. I'm really refraining from hitting the drop right now, but I don't understand it.
It does seem that he doesn't understand the concept of alternate realities or alternate universes, because although Marvel has established that their MCU is in an alternate universe to the comic books, before that, they didn't. Neither company established that the films were in a different continuity to the comic books, but they clearly were, because different stuff happened. So the Christopher Reeve Superman was raised in the 50s, whereas in the comics, the comic Superman was active in the 50s. And the George Reeve TV series was of its time. So all of these things are, all of the films are their own continuity, because they have to be, because otherwise they would all be period pieces.
Yeah, so let's take this logic to its logical conclusion, right? So okay, let's say that we can't have any adaptation that doesn't that it changes in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, like you said, it would be a period piece. Everything would be a period piece. It would be a literal, direct retelling of stories, and in some cases, that would not be a good thing. Example would be, let me think.
The Shining.
Fair. I mean, I was trying to get good point. I was thinking more in comics adaptations, but that's accurate as well. Like it's
well, would it be when Batman used to carry a gun?
Yeah, when he wore purple gloves. Yeah, which I'm actually all for. They need to bring back the purple gloves.
Yeah, please.
Like, that shit was fire. Like
they need to bring back the Batman with the different colored costumes, where he had a pink costume and all the colors of the rainbow. They need to put that in film. Direct adaptation of that storyline, please.
But the idea that, and this is another thing that's kind of tangential but related, he's supposed to be a libertarian, and he's basically wanting to restrict creativity. He's wanting to limit what can be done with expression, which, from what I understand, is like the opposite of what libertarians are supposed to be about. But he's just a Republican, basically. He may say he doesn't vote for Trump or whatever the fuck, but like, dude, in effect, all of his content is just regular old conservative. Libertarian is just, especially these days, that's just a label for people that don't want to admit they're Republican, that think they're too cool to call themselves a Republican. But yeah, as this says here, Black Superman is canon. He is canon. It just is canon because it exists, and it was created by these publishers that own the IP. It just is. You may not like it. You may, I wouldn't care if he was making videos to sell his kind of boring book, to saying that, what, I don't like these alternate reality characters, but like, that's their IP. They can do it if they want to or whatever. But that's not what he's saying. It's like, it's botched opportunities. It's breaks canon and lore. It's like, I'm not a gatekeeper, man, but like when it comes to using concepts that you don't seem to understand and creating arbitrary gatekeepy rules, doing that. And then I have to deal with people. They're going to be in the comments of this fucking stream and whatever video. They're going to be saying it and repeating this bullshit as if they don't listen to what I say. And that they don't understand it either. It is canon. Anyway. Sorry.
Yeah. To me, it's like, hasn't he read like The Dark Knight Returns, which is like one of the greatest, known as the greatest comic books of all time?
He actually has, and he said he doesn't like it.
Okay.
I thought he said he hadn't read it.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, there was a tweet. Somebody showed him an image from The Dark Knight Returns saying, well, what do you think of this? And he didn't like the art style, and he never read it. I think that's what it was.
You're right.
He hasn't read it. and doesn't
Because
like the art.
that messes with the archetypes of the villains of how they're seen, and I'm sure there's so many people when that first came out that were like, "This isn't by Batman. What is this? What is this?"
Mm-hmm.
Like it was absolutely insane. And reading that alone should let people let the artists have the creative freedom to do great stories like that, where they're going to have to change things around, but you're going to get to see characters in a whole different light, and it's going to add to them. It's going to add to them. So then when you go back in time and like, how did Catwoman get to be like that? Like other writers are going to take over, and they're going to start adding their own thing. And it's like, well, if Catwoman was like this in Dark Knight Returns, maybe she got like that because of this. Like, it's so that to me has always been like, I understand people care about lore, but to me, when it comes to adaptations of different mediums, do whatever you want. I don't care if Clark Kent is black. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's going to be a different take. It's a movie. It's a film. You know.
I mean, the key word is adaptation. Whenever you adapt it to any different type of medium, it's going to change. And even when you adapt to the same medium, you don't want to do the exact same thing because the old one still exists.
Yeah,
it's been around for a long time, and to prove that, we're going to look at the very first example of a multiverse and showing that, there's multiple versions of a character and universe and stuff like that. And that this is all, I don't know about this example, but like it's all canon. And until I opened this just now, I thought, like it says here, that the first example of the multiverse was in 1961 in Flash number 123, but that's not true. We first saw parallel Earths in DC Comics in Wonder Woman number 59, published in 1953, produced by, so I mean, it's been around. It's been a superhero comics came into existence in 1938. And so here you've got, not even 20 years later, multiverse is established as being a superhero comic thing. And it was, further taken further with the 1961. And that, I guarantee you that Eric July at some point has loved the Flash, right? But the Flash is the second version of the Flash. This applies to the legacy character complaints too. The people that are like, "Oh, I don't legacy characters, create your own characters." Like, well, what about the Flash? The one that people know generally and love is the second one. Same with Green Lantern.
Okay. Yeah.
But for some reason those don't count. It's because they existed before they were born. So it's anything that changes in their awareness is whenever they get upset about it. So yeah, Wonder Woman. Yeah, strange. She's holding her lasso when it's struck by lightning, and a strange mix of energies sends her to a strange reality where she encounters an identical double. And this woman introduces herself as Terra Taruna, explaining that the name translates to Wonder Woman on her planet. Earth must have a twin world existing simultaneously alongside it, but developing differently, which just is what the multiverse is, right? Like, great job, Diana. You described it. And then, of course, you got the Flash. I mean, without a multiverse, the Justice League as we know it wouldn't exist. And I also bet that because another event that came out in the 90s in that same period that I'm willing to bet that Eric was into was Age of Apocalypse. Age of Apocalypse was a big, enormous event that I was reading comics at the time. I had subscriptions to like 3 different X-Men titles. And I remember reading it, the Legion quest, and it gets to because his son Legion goes back in time to kill Magneto before he could start all the problems he starts. He was trying to help his dad, Professor X. And he accidentally kills Professor X instead. And so 20 years before he created the X-Men. And then that changed reality to where now the Earth is basically ruled by Apocalypse and his evil asshole minions. And, mutants they're the dominant species, but like humans are hunted to extinction. None of the other heroes really exist. And it's an alternate reality. And ultimately they fix it and goes back to normal. But side note, man, I remember this was before I understood how comic books work. I was just now getting super into the lore and stuff. And I, like I said, had subscriptions, got to the part where he killed Xavier 20 years before the X-Men. And then everything changed. And then the end of the book was like, the X-Men is gone. and they're like, here's these 4 other titles that start at number 1. There was Astonishing X-Men and like Gambit and the Externals, and it was like all these alternate takes that I didn't know that was going to be a temporary thing. I'm like, what the fuck are they doing?
Yeah, like all the X-Men titles changed for like 4 months.
4 months,
X-Men was huge at that point. I want to say there was like 9 X-Men titles at that point, so it was a pretty big crossover.
Yeah, it was a big deal. But that was an alternate reality, and you get I mean, technically, like Bishop is an alternate reality because he's from an alternate future. Just the more I think about it, I could probably really pick a lot of stuff apart that if I cared enough to look, I could find him saying something positive about. I don't know. Another thing that if things were done his way, Eric July's way, it would ruin characters in the comics because Superman, for example, a lot of the stuff that we know about Superman was created in the Donner film. Like, well, not a lot of it, some of it. There are aspects to Superman lore that was then adopted back into the comics, right? Basically his origin to some degree. There was certain things established in the movie in 1978 that then the comics adopted, and then those are the comics that Eric no doubt was reading comics and just assuming that this is just Superman. This is what Superman is, right? And same thing can be said for Harley Quinn is a pretty obvious one. She was created on Batman animated series and then became a comic book character, and I'm sure there's no short list of examples like that.
Didn't Spider-Man have natural web shooters for a little bit in the comic books because of the movies?
Yeah, it was generally not well liked, and they they changed it back.
Yeah, it was a weird thing to change.
It's the one of the most praised runs of X-Men, new X-Men, was changed to more match the X-Men movie, Grant Morrison's run, where they changed it. They're wearing leather costumes and shit to kind of, these mediums are kind of living organisms together in a way, right? Like what happens in one can happen in the other. And what's the thing that changes? What decides when something changes? Success, money. When something is successful and makes a lot of money, if it's in the comics and that's the very popular version, they're going to adapt that to the movies. If they do a movie version and they add a thing or tweak something and people love that version, there's good chance they might adapt it back into the comic books. They are symbiotic mediums that are constantly evolving together and back and forth. And the fact that he doesn't understand this stuff, despite acting like such an expert, I don't know, guys. I'm starting to think he's a grifter.
What?
Surely
I can't
not.
believe it.
Oh, sorry to hear about your mom. Hope she recovers quickly. Yeah, it really is just a convenient way to shit on things without having to actually say what you really think, I guess. I don't know. My friend Willow, Questing Refuge, pointed out that as far as they can tell, it also happens to usually be examples that are, the gender is different or the race is different for the alternate reality character, right? Like the reason they don't care about the Flash and, the Jay Garrick one versus the Barry Allen one is because, well, both white guys, and of course there's a wrinkle to it with Eric July because, obviously he's not a white guy, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't serve the narratives and purposes of I guess we'll say white supremacist society, in the not the literal sense like the white supremacy, but like the idea that white is the default dominant culture and should always be that, which makes him a token, by the way. Sorry.
I just reminded of when the 1989 Batman came out, and my parents were like, well, this isn't Batman. They've made it all scary. Why isn't he like the Adam West version? And at one time, that was people's Batmans, and that fed into the comics at the time as well. I think either they had planned to, or there was a character which was in the 66 TV series that then went to the comics, just like the animated series.